pricing is relative to the value that is being offered, and because the value is so fantastic. A lot of people tend to go in, compete on pricing, and we call that the race to the bottom. Not interested in that game. There's also a piece of blue ocean strategy that converges on pricing too. And they make it very clear in the book that pricing does not mean price it as low as possible or price it to the moon, but rather it seems that to hit a blue ocean strategy, to nail it in terms of your ability to grow like exponentially, right? Because that's what we all want in a business. We want to grow exponentially. We want to have vast growth, explosive profits and revenues and all that stuff. And also, of course, provide great value and service to others. Well, every single blue ocean that's listed in the book, and even in terms of liquid death, they all nailed something, which is the pricing is relative to the value that is being offered, and because the value is so fantastic. So how's a better way to say that? A lot of people tend to go in and compete on pricing, and this is again a red ocean strategy. You compete on the pricing and you try to undercut all of your competitors, and we call that the race to the bottom. You've probably heard about me talk about that. Where again, think about your Walmarts and your Amazons and stuff, right? Those big companies are always racing to the bottom. Like, who can sell this can of liquid death for the cheapest possible price? Because most people in that kind of commoditized world are just looking for the best price. So that is really for the big boys to play. We're not interested in that game. That's a zero-sum game at the end of the day. There is the luxury brand side of things too, which, by the way, is a fantastic model. Both models are great. They're on the furthest ends of the spectrum. So think of your Rolls Royce and your Rolex and whatever expensive things you could come to mind. Designer brand clothing. Those are priced and they're exclusive. Both of those extremes exist, and they should exist forever because they're fantastic. Somewhere in the middle is where we tend to see explosive growth, that blue ocean stuff where the curve just rises exponentially. And it's because they've nailed two things: innovation and price. If we think about the iPhone, for example, it's not cheap. However, it's so innovative and so unique, especially when it first came out. Think about, 20 years ago, again, when that first came out, it was so explosive and innovative. And the price wasn't $10,000. It could have been $10,000. It was that good of a product for sure. It probably could have been $5,000, but no, they sold it for, I think the original iPhone was less than $1,000, if I'm not mistaken. And it's still, relatively speaking, under $1,000 today. They found a sweet price point where, hey, this value point is worth it for us as a company. We will profit from this. And in fact, if we really nail the innovation and the adoption of this product or commodity or service, people are going to buy so much of it that at the end of the day, it doesn't need to be priced unbelievably high, but we also don't need to totally undercut ourselves just to beat out Samsung. So Apple nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. Liquid Death did too. Is their price a little bit more than a plastic water bottle? Yes. I think there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, it's coming in an aluminum can, and they're kind of, the water ones are kind of the tall boy cans, so they're a little bit bigger. So their price on that aluminum can is undoubtedly more than a plastic water bottle. But it's not so overpriced that it feels unreachable to the masses. Overpriced water would be like Sandpel, for example, right? Sandpel, like a water bottle from Sandpel is ridiculous. It's so expensive. Evian's kind of the same way, right? Even though they're a plastic water bottle, they're like fancy in Swiss Alps or whatever. They said, no, we don't need that. And we definitely don't need to be a 99-cent can of water. We want to find a price that is meaningful, we can profit off of. That's really important. Okay. So they're not saying we're going to find a price and like just barely scrape by. We're going to make a healthy profit, but at the same time, it's not going to be so freaking expensive that it's out of range for the vast majority of our buyers. Super important. Liquid Death is not trying to get multi-billionaires as their buyers or multi-millionaires necessarily. They're actually not trying to get anybody but the massive audience at large. Someone like me, right? I don't know if I would have ever bought a Liquid Death can of water or one of their flavored waters had it been $5.99 for a bottle. I don't know. Maybe I would have, but I feel like that adoption curve would have been a lot harder. So I think they priced it perfectly. And Cirque du Soleil did the same thing. They said, hey, we don't need to price ourselves like a Wicked musical ticket, however much those go for now, like $1 bazillion a ticket. But we also don't need to be, I don't know, $20 like a circus ticket might be. We can probably price ourselves somewhere in the middle because our values and our innovation is so great that price is going to be worth it to our customers. And our customers come from a wide audience. They come from both the aristocratic side and both the fun carny side. And we're smushing those two together. So now they're pulling from a bigger audience size. They're pulling from a bigger portion of possible buyers within that overarching industry of like entertainment, live entertainment. And Liquid Death, again, they did the exact same thing. They said, hey, we can get the concert goers, we can get the guys who just gave up drinking at the bar, we can get the backyard picnic people, we can get all these people drinking our product. And we're going to brand it so that it feels really interesting and innovative. And by the way, you're doing a great thing for the environment. You're using less plastic. I think that is so powerful. And so I think, number one, we're really lucky in this day and age because inherently speaking, if you're in the wellness industry like we are, if you own a hormone replacement therapy practice or weight loss practice or aesthetics, whatever you're doing, it's already it was blue ocean big time, and it still is, in my humble opinion. I know a lot of people feel like it's like, everybody and their grandmother's opening one up, and that's true, but it's still pretty blue ocean in the sense that it's not widely adopted. When we niche a little bit further down from a 10,000 foot view, though, I agree, it is kind of getting a little bit red ocean. It does feel like everybody and their grandmother's selling weight loss and hormone replacement therapy. And so now the question is, okay, how can I operate in this same industry? How can I keep doing the same thing I'm doing, but create a blue ocean out of it? And it requires innovation and it requires strategy. Innovation could be, maybe I niche down further. Maybe I niche down into a group of buyers who are like super non-buyers, like people who would have never considered that. I did that with Apollo, and I didn't do this from a blue ocean perspective because I never read about the book, but I understood that in the world of testosterone replacement therapy, for example, especially 5-10 years ago, even I started, barely 5 years ago. There was this idea that testosterone replacement therapy is for bros and for jocks and meatheads. And so most of the TRT clinics marketed to those people. I would say the vast majority, probably, 70% of all TRT clinics out there, the way they marketed was, ripped abs and chest and big biceps and that kinds of stuff, lose belly fat, get a bigger erection, like the typical, male bro stuff. And that was their customer base. By the way, it's not a very good customer base. On the other end of the spectrum, we had, maybe 10 or 20% of clinics out there who were on the anti-aging side of things. So they were marketing to, men and women especially, but let's just stick with men for a second. Men above the age of, let's just say 50, who we would consider your probably most ideal candidate for testosterone replacement therapy, right? Old guys who need help. So when I came in, I said, you know what? Here's how I'm gonna differentiate. I don't want to compete in this red ocean, which is basically TRT clinics marketing heavily to gym bros and meatheads. They're not good. Number one, they're not very good clients. They're not very good customers. They don't typically have a lot of disposable income. They're also very used to getting this stuff on the black market for, $20 or whatever. Like, they're not going to stick around very long. They're going to be a kind of a big pain in your butt. So I didn't market to those guys. On the other end, we had just like elderly people, like for old guys, which again, I'm not just disparaging either of these tactics. I just said, okay, I don't really want to compete in that market either. There's this pool of men who are frankly like my age, let's just say between the ages of 20 and 40 or 20 and 50, there's kind of this, let's just call it middle-aged adult men who are not classically gym bros. Okay. They might go to the gym, they might exercise, but they're like nerds and dorks like me. They have families, they're engineers, they are businessmen. Maybe they're in real estate. They're just your average guy, your white picket fence, uh, guy or gal who is married and has 3 or 4 kids. That's who I'm going to market to. They're basically non-customers because most of those people don't actually know they need TRT, but they definitely do. So ways in which I marketed towards that and innovated around that was going to, first of all, gyms and personal trainers who specifically trained these types of individuals. So I was not going to the gyms that were playing crazy loud metal music and death metal and people powerlifting and stuff, although I do get some patients from those gyms. Nor was I going to Crunch Fitness. I was going to more of the high-end personal training, the one-on-one touch things, because again, people with high disposable incomes, your engineers, your businessmen, your realtors, these guys were typically hanging out in those spaces and finding great value from there. And then I also marketed to my female patients, right? Most of my female patients coming in, they were already that market. They were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, dealing with some hormonal imbalances, maybe some fertility stuff. And so I started marketing towards their husbands. And I would literally create emails and even when I was doing social media stuff, posts and reels and whatever, marketing to those females who were married to husbands who, again, they were probably starting to feel tired, fatigued. Maybe their libido was kind of down. Maybe they were working out, but they weren't getting the, results that they were hoping for. And so I said, this is the perfect audience. And I just need to find ways to get in there and start planting seeds and start educating. I personally was a great example. I was 30 when I started testosterone replacement therapy, and I'm so happy for that. And so I used myself as my own marketing billboard. Like, hey, look at me. Like, I was just like you. I was tired and fatigued and overweight and miserable. And I started testosterone replacement therapy and focusing on diet and lifestyle and exercise again. And it all just exploded from there. I feel so much better. And don't you want that too? And your wives, my gosh, will be so happy. In fact, my wife can speak to that. I remember my wife wrote an email. I think that was, excuse me, my nose is kind of itchy. My wife wrote an email that was somewhat similar to that regard too, right? Like, hey, listen, ladies, if your husbands were like my husband, several years ago, like I totally get it. And it would be amazing if you would consider, calling the office and scheduling for your husband, because they might just feel so bad and they might not even know it, that they don't know where to go or who to see. And that was an incredible marketing tool for me. And it really created all of a sudden this blue ocean, because again, I wasn't competing with literally the TRT clinic down the street or up the street. I mean, there are multiples around me. I live in Cincinnati. It's a huge city. I all of a sudden did not find myself competing with these clinics at all. My pricing was different. My value offers were different. What was included, what wasn't included. But at the end of the day, it was really the innovation around the marketing and even the branding that sold me and my clinic, Apollo Health Optimization, better than anything else. So again, the innovation part doesn't mean you have to come up with a new way to do testosterone replacement therapy, like a new device or a new administration tactic. It doesn't mean that you have to reinvent the wheel in any way, shape, or form around the actual medical aspect of it. It might just mean you need to be innovative around the way you market and brand things, just like Liquid Death, right? They at the end of the day, it's just water in a freaking container. But what made them set apart was they went for an audience that wasn't fully captured, and they did it in a way that was interesting and fun and created a lot of value along the way. So I think that's really, really, really purposeful. And again, I challenge all of you, because a lot of people, they ask me, Nico, like, how should I price my services and what should I include and all these things? And guys, that's going to get harder and harder to do. Again, it's like, how can I bottle water differently? Well, you can do it in a can, and that's a little different. But at the end of the day, look, these are just containers. I think you need to get a little bit more innovative. And I think you need to consider maybe your marketing or maybe your advertising or maybe your branding. Consider the level of concierge that you're going to provide. That is still wildly underplayed, wildly underplayed. We talked about unreasonable hospitality at the Nico Live event just about a month ago, or really the beginning of this month, and we talked about how impactful just being unbelievably hospitable and concierge to your clients can be. And you can show up in different ways. I have so many different students doing things on that front. Like I had one student, Derek, who's incredible. Him and his wife, they hang pictures, like success pictures of their patients in their clinic on their wall. And they also hang pictures of, little written testimonials, like from an email or Google review all over the walls. I think that's so amazing. That's great. Isn't that creating a little bit of a blue ocean? For sure. For sure. Like it doesn't have to be so unbelievably profound. You don't have to necessarily create the iPhone here. What you do need to consider is that if you're constantly focusing on the red ocean stuff and how do I compete around pricing and how do I compete around delivering, testosterone to the masses, you can still make money in there, by the way. It's just challenging and it's just difficult. And it's always going to end up at this race to the bottom, which is annoying and uncomfortable. And no one wants to be in that position because honestly, most of us don't have the reach and the capital to keep up with that.